Thank you for bestowing on us this very, very kind honor. We are moved, grateful, and perhaps most importantly, heartened, as this was a film we had been told time and again we should not pursue. This was an issue no one would watch, believe, or care about. We were told not to waste our time. No one would listen. Every day in our US military, according to DoD estimates, 49 men and women are sexually assaulted. Not overseas, not in the line of combat, not by the enemy, but here on American soil by their fellow soldiers. And when these men and women step up in good faith to report these crimes, they are more often than not disbelieved, themselves blamed, disavowed, and encouraged to stay silent so that the institution and its commanders can maintain an unblemished facade. So they bury their pain, confusedly return to work beside their assailants, suffer recurring attacks often, until they, more often than not, implode, not from the trauma of the assaults themselves, but from the violence of the silence imposed upon them, by their inability to speak and share, to be heard and believed by their peers and community. In the past, when the media has reported assaults in our military, these crimes have been depicted as aberrant, anomalous, the work of rogue soldiers who operate independently and beyond the knowledge and authority of their commanders. The stories flare up, tailhook, Aberdeen, and fade, as this type of reporting often presents the false hope that the issue will be expeditiously resolved once this batch of bad apples has been duly disciplined. Our film discloses the ways in which soldier-on-soldier rape is a daily and ongoing occurrence, aided and abetted by a perfect storm confluence of circumstances, which leads to its successful proliferation and cover-up. Far from being aberrations or one-off scandals, these crimes are manifestations of an ongoing epidemic, one that is ravaging the well-being of our troops, creating generations of traumatized survivors and families, and has been going on unchecked right here for decades. After a good year plus of being unable to receive funding to make this film, Kirby and I just decided to travel around the country and talk to survivors without a crew. Their stories were harrowing and heartbreaking, each one uncannily echoing the other, even though these men and women had all served in different branches, different decades, and different parts of our country. I remember leaving the house of one woman in upstate New York, Teresa, now 40 and a single mom. She had entered the Army when she was 19. After telling me her story, as I was leaving, she said, "Amy, even if you don't make this documentary, or even if you do end up making this documentary, and I'm not in it, thank you so much for coming today to talk with me. You're the first person who ever believed me, who ever cared to listen. Thank you all today for listening. It's so important, and for championing the importance of listening. And thank you so much for this award. It means so much to me and my fellow filmmakers Kirby Dick and Tanner Barklow, but most importantly to countless service members, much more courageous than we could ever be, who dared to speak the truth to our cameras, despite the considerable risks they were taking in doing so. They did this not for personal glory or self-aggrandizement, but simply because each and every one of them told me they never wanted another soldier to have to go through what they had. We accept this award most truly and kindly on their behalf and dedicate it to them. And thank you all for having the kindness and compassion in bestowing it, as it lets them know that you are there, you are listening, and they are no longer invisible.
Amy always brings down the house. First of all, I would just like to just say how honored I am just to be in this room with everyone here. There's so many people here that helped shape my political education, really, over the last many decades. So I'm sure that I could, this is, a lot of the films that I've made have been really informed by a lot of the work that you've done, so thank you. We're very honored and humbled to receive the Ridenhour Film Prize. When Amy and I were making this film, we were hoping that it would shed light on an epidemic that has been going on for decades and that the military has been especially effective at keeping covered up. But we were not very optimistic that the film would change much because the military and our government had always responded in the past to reports about rape in the military by denying them, blaming the victims, and claiming that the problem was solved. We never expected the impact that this film would have. Not only did Secretary of Defense Leon Panetta announce some significant policy changes, but the military has begun to use the film as part of its sexual assault training. And over the last year, more than 250,000 servicemen and women have seen the film. All the Joint Chiefs of Staff have seen the film. In one case, General Welsh, the Air Force Chief of Staff, flew in all 164 wing commanders from around the world to the Pentagon to see the film and discuss the issue. As far as we know, this is the first time in history that all wing commanders have been called back to the Pentagon. So what has happened is that the military has begun to take the issue seriously. In fact, Secretary Hagel said at one point that this is the second most important issue the military has to face after Afghanistan. But the problem still continues. Tens of thousands of men and women are still being sexually assaulted each year. These assaults continue because the military's criminal justice system is rife with conflict of interest and potential cronyism. Right now, senior officers in the chain of command of both the victim and the accused adjudicate these crimes, not trained prosecutors without direct ties to the perpetrators. The one institution that can change this is Congress, which has oversight of the military. And that is why we're most pleased that the Senate, which has been completely absent on this issue for decades, is finally starting to move on the issue. Senator Gillibrand of New York and other senators, Senator Blumenthal, Senator McCaskill, are drafting legislation right now to change the military's legal justice system so survivors of military rape can receive impartial justice. It's not going to be an easy fight. The military is pushing back hard on this, insisting it can solve the problem if we just leave it alone. It can't and it won't. So we are very grateful for this award because it comes at such a crucial time. In fact, the markups to these bills are happening in June in the subcommittee and in the House Armed Services Committee. So this is a perfect time. We are very grateful because it will help to bring much needed attention to this issue so that Congress and the military will finally make the changes they need to make to protect our men and women in uniform. Thank you very much.
And if I can just say one more thing, I didn't mean to get so emotional, and I wanted to go off book and introduce someone who's here who's super important. Ben Clay, would you please stand up? And because no, stay standing. I'm going to talk about you for just 1 second. Because I was so, I wanted to add you in gracefully, and I had to stay on book. This is, when I said the service members who had much more courage than either Kirby and I, if I can just take a second and tell your story really short. We finished the film, we submitted to Sundance. Kirby brilliantly said, you know what, we better get a survivor when it's happening absolutely here right now. Like, what if our cases are set as, all your subjects are too old? We found Ariana Clay, who is right now going through a court-martial and she served at Marine Barracks, Washington. I spoke to her. She said she'd absolutely do an interview. I said, why are you in the military? She said, oh, my husband, he was undergrad at Yale, graduate school at Harvard, decided he really wanted to dedicate his life to serving our country, and joined the military. He's an officer, 2 tours of duty in Iraq. And I said, wow, could I talk to your husband? And she said, well, of course you could, but he could never talk to you guys on camera. He'd never get permission. So I said, that's okay. Spoke with Ben. We had an amazing phone call. He's completely brilliant. And I said, Ben, would there be any chance, could you maybe get a release? If we'd love to speak with you as well. And he said, Amy, A, I don't really, trust the media, and I don't know you. You sound nice, but I don't know what you're going to do with our story. B, if anyone, I would never get permission. So even if I spoke to you, it's a non-starter. And he said, see, we've kind of suffered enough. So thank you, and so I said, okay, fair enough, Ben. How about this? We're done with the film. Why don't I come out? I'll interview Ariana. We'll interview you. Don't sign a release. We'll go home, LA, cut it, send it right back to you. You'll look at it. You'll see who we are. You'll see exactly what we're going to use, and then you'll decide. And maybe you'll think there's someone you could ask higher up who would give you permission. He said, okay, no harm, no foul. That's mine. Come on over. We interviewed Ariana. We interviewed Ben. Raced back to LA, cut it, December 26th, sent it to them. January 2nd, my cell phone rings. It's Ben. He says, Amy, when is Sundance? I said, it's in 20 days. We premiere on January 22nd. He said, I thought about it, and I'm going to resign. He said, they'd never give me permission, but I always wanted to serve my country, and maybe this is the best way I can do it.